This is the second of 3 boatloads of travellers who, in July 1997, visited the remote South Pacific island of Banaba.
It's such a journey to get here. You're very physically tired, you're emotionally completely drained. You get off that boat and you see this island and you see the wreckage out in Home Bay. Oh, and your heart just breaks.
Banaba Island lies just south of the equator. From 1900 to 1979, it was better known as Ocean Island. Its 4 square miles provided the richest source of phosphate in the British Empire. Ships arrived daily to carry away the precious raw material to Australia, where it was turned into fertiliser. In the process, the island was devastated. The only way to get to Banaba now is to charter a boat from Tarawa in the Gilbert Islands. This crossing became 48 hours of choppy cruising with no land and no ships in sight. Banaba was once the home of the Banaban people. Most Banabans now live 1,600 miles to the south on a Fijian island called Rambi, to which they were exiled by the British government in 1945 to get them out of the way of the phosphate mining. This trip was a rare opportunity for Banabans from Rambi to visit their ancestral homeland and the few hundred of their people who have gone back there to live. Others were returning to the island where they, or their parents, worked for the British Phosphate Commission and enjoyed the colonial way of life. These are people whose relationships with a tiny Pacific island, and therefore with each other, have been shaped by huge global forces, by international commerce, by the politics of empire, and by world war. All of them were in one way or another coming home to Banaba. What brought Stacey King here is a strong sense of the injustice done to the Banaban people.
I'm the 6th generation of the descendants of the miners that mined the island. And all of us Australians, we grew rich during those years in our wheat fields, in our production of sheep and wool through Banaban phosphate.
Akatia kiosay kanangin buburay kanangin doire hanga yawas yatwena kwaki yakakaki ayasuku sip awanta yanang pa tiama tari yana tanun na pa unika mo yang aroya yai ngayon na ba itangira na pa mo yang aroyari.
And that's the saddest part about it, you know, it's such a moral issue in a physical sense. Forget the money issue, it's a physical issue of actually putting that soil in Australia.
The phosphate industry transformed the physical landscape of Banaba.
Right. Big store's been second. Used to come up here and thump the sides out of it, all the hammer marks behind there. Oh. So, because the phosphate would get damp and stick. Oh, used to come up with a big hammer and try and pull on a rope and swing that up there, like that there. Phosphate production was clearing the jungle off with the bulldozer usually, grabbing the soil out with a grab into trucks, or the phosphate into trucks, bringing the trucks up to the crusher up there, crushing it, put into storage bins, from the storage bins onto conveyor belts into one of these dryers, or this particular one dryer behind us. There's a burner for the diesel. Just I've unscrewed that and cleaned the thing off. That would go in there like that. Dropped out the other end. Long conveyor belts into the storage bin. Into the storage bin to the ships. And then ships to Melbourne.
In theory, it would be possible to remove the ruins left by the phosphate miners. But the other great change to the landscape is almost certainly irreversible. These coral pinnacles once provided an isolated perching place for seabirds. For millions of years they dropped their bird lime and filled in the spaces between the pinnacles with guano. The island sunk beneath the ocean several times in geological history, and the guano was converted to phosphate of lime. It took just 80 years to mine away the phosphate and reveal the pinnacles again. Before mining began, the surface of the island was above the top of the pinnacles. Just above here was the village of Burkonakai, where Ken Sigra's clan lived.
As you can see now, usually we should talk in the village, but now we're talking 50 meters under the village. You can see by the pinnacles. These pinnacles might be 20, 30 meters underground. Now we're sitting at the very root of the pinnacles. Well, which means that the village is gone. So when the land goes, and that's it. When the sacred land goes and all our water holes gone, the spirit of the people seems to be lost too.
Mining transformed the social landscape of Banaba too. Before 1900, the Banabans had very little contact with the rest of the world. But a sample of Banaban phosphate found its way to Australia, where Albert Ellis was on the lookout for new sources of the highly profitable raw material. He persuaded the Banabans to grant the Pacific Phosphate Company exclusive mining rights for 999 years. In return, they would receive £50 per annum. The flag followed trade, and in 1901 Banaba, with its 450 natives and 4 villages, was annexed to the British colony of the Gilbert and Ellice Islands. Banaban families leased their land to the miners and soon slipped into the role of a rentier class, using the royalties they earned from the mining to buy the white man's imported food. Gilbert and Ellice Islanders, Japanese and Chinese, were brought in to do the work the Banabans didn't want. It soon became clear to the Banabans that their island was being devastated. In 1920, the governments of Australia, New Zealand and Britain bought out the Phosphate Company and formed the BPC, the British Phosphate Commission. With every new demand for their lands, the Banabans argued for better royalty payments and began to be seen by the BPC as a nuisance. The British government helped the BPC out by passing a law permitting the compulsory purchase of Banaban land. That was how Ken Sigra's ancestral village came to be destroyed.
Actually, what I'm saying, I just feel sorry for what happened to my people. I feel sorry for them, even for myself. These kind of feelings is pretty hard to reveal, you know. And this is where our ancestors were born. Even though we were born in Fiji, our hearts and our spirits are still in this place. We'll never forget Ocean Island. That's it.
Life for the colonial community on Ocean Island was pleasant enough. Stacey King's mother lived here in the 1930s as a young child and remembers the Banabans well.
We came with our parents, my brother and I, and we had the most wonderful time with them. We were the only white children. All our playmates were Banabans. We had such times playing with them, swimming with them.
Before the Second World War, Japan had been the third biggest buyer of Banaban phosphate.
His name was Lindsay William Henry Cole, born on the 25th of February 1912, died in September 1943 during the Japanese occupation of Ocean Island. He was one of the three European men that died at the hands of the Japanese.
In 1941, the Japanese invaded Banaba to guarantee its phosphate supplies. The Banabans were deported to labour camps on other islands. 1/3 of the Banaban people died. Macon Corrie's father was beheaded here on Banaba. She was made to watch.
It's still in my mind. I can't remember. I can't forget it. So when I first saw Banaba, and it came to my mind, I saw my father. Every time when I talk about this island and my family, I have to cry.
After liberation, the Royal Navy gathered the dispersed Banabans in Tarawa. But instead of going home to Ocean Island, the Banabans found themselves shipped off to exile on the island of Rambi in Fiji, 2,000 kilometres away.
Rambi was bought for them with their own phosphate money during World War II, or the start of World War II. And the Banabans were all shipped off there because the excuse was the Japanese had destroyed all the buildings, there was no place for Banabans back here. So that you could say that the Japanese actually played in the British government's hands by getting rid of the Banaba problem as they were known then.
They were told by the government that they will be sent to Rambi instead of Banaba.
And what did people think?
She said that whether they like it or not to come back to Banaba, they don't have any say because the government have got the power. And the government and send them there, but truly they don't want to go to Rambi, they want to come back.
The Banabans arrived on Rambi in December 1945, still weak from their wartime ordeal. It was the middle of the hurricane season. The rations lasted for only 2 months. 40 of the oldest Banabans died. Back on Banaba, the post-war colonial community picked up life where it had been interrupted in 1941.
We arrived here thinking it was going to be very primitive, and it wasn't. It was just wonderful right from the start.
When did Dad build this wall, Mum? Was it just after
Only about the first term, in our first term, yes.
Should we go and have a look at the wash
Oh,
house?
look.
There's a family living in there, obviously.
Yeah, there must be someone inside.
Yes, it is someone else's house now. Children grew up here. I had another third son that was born here in 1967, Scott. And all in all, they were the most 10 wonderful years of my life.
I wonder where the owners are, people who live here.
To the carefree life. There was no television, so we really had to make our own fun and entertainment.
It's very emotional. I think we're coming to terms that perhaps the buildings really aren't the heart and soul of the island.
It's the magic of the atmosphere, isn't it?
And the sea and the reef and the places that we had so much time playing together as kids haven't changed.
No. Our houses aren't there, and that was very sad. But we remember everything vividly. The only thing that's different is it's dilapidated. And that's it.
Swim.
The bus used to come along here, drop us off. You know, I used to come here after school and play the piano. It was the only piano on the island. So I used to come up here, play the piano upstairs, and go for my swim, come back, catch the bus.
I only played it once, and that was when I was at boarding school. My mum and dad had paid for a whole year of piano lessons. I hated it.
Did you?
And then they wanted to see the finished product, and I played them chopsticks. I lived tennis after that.
Very good.
Life was good. My wife and I thought life was very good. Tropical life, plenty of social life. Yeah, it's good. Good life. We thoroughly enjoyed it.
But among these people living on Banaba, there were hardly any Banabans.
We were not aware of a great Banaban presence here when we were here. We were mainly aware of just being the Gilbert and Ellice Islanders, as they were called in those days, yes. I guess by the end of the time that I was here, I started to be conscious of what was happening, that the island was being mined away, and where were the people.
Banabans, I don't remember hearing a lot about as a child and their plight. I've had a lot of thoughts about what has happened and what the BPC have actually done with, in hindsight, very little consideration for the future. And I guess it gets back to greed, which is the downfall with so many things in the world.
We were mining somebody else's land, basically. I was aware of that. We weren't aware of the actual plight they were in until we got took back to Melbourne and started to read up about them, and then we realised how bad they've been done by.
It was a little bit like, I suppose, mining everywhere all over the world. People just didn't think of the consequences.
I feel very sorry for them.
In 1975, the Banabans sued the BPC and the British government for compensation for the loss of their island. The case turned into the longest and most expensive civil action of its day. The court even visited Banaba. The judge agreed that over the years the British government had failed in the moral duty it owed the Banabans, and that the Banabans had had a raw deal. But he was powerless to impose any remedy. He found that BPC had failed to keep a promise made in 1913 to replant the Banabans' land with food-bearing trees. He ordered that moderate compensation be paid, but he would not specify an amount. After the court case, the British government offered the Banabans £10 million in final settlement of their claims. The offer was eventually accepted and the money invested. In 1979, the phosphate reserves were exhausted. The mining stopped and so did the royalties paid to the Banabans. Their main source of income since then has been the interest earned on their £10 million investment. Since 1979, about 400 Banabans have moved back to live in Banaba. The population of the island now is about the same as it was in 1900. These are the lucky few, chosen from among the many who wish to return. They have few material possessions. They live like squatters in the derelict and asbestos-ridden accommodation left by the BPC. Most employment is provided by maintenance work, paid for by the Council of Leaders that administers Ramby.
The same Council of Leaders administers the island here. Now, every month $12,000 is sent here for the administration, here. That $12,000 is actually, it's not given to the island just to support them, they earn it here. They have to work for their wages. The biggest fears the Banaban has, that if he doesn't keep a presence here on Banaba, that someone else will walk in.
Kana ko may kwakin temane na ko ikai sinangin ikaw kina Banaba ibukin mewi arakora kay kami na ikai pa aki akana ya konandik pa antia pa imeten kana ta intiringa ai ekora aki to wana te pai akonandiki awaki aki kona namara ke nantia pa nangayari temane ri na ko mai ko ibukin te ka ko mendistoa awakamakura ki akamakura ki deke po ya awakapo kana ya mendistoa.
The imported food in the shop is the mainstay of life on Banaba, alongside the fish caught locally. There is little land fit for cultivation. Only the thin coastal strip of the island remains unmined. Water supply is a problem too. But since the last drought broke, a few crops have been grown.
We do call it a tapioca in our language.
Does that also need a lot of water?
Yes, it does. And the tallest one is the banana. Life on Banaba is easy because the main point of the easiest of life is fishing grounds. Fishing grounds are very near. Just surrounding the island, you surround the island with fishing grounds, surrounding the island you cook many fish. There's no trouble with fishing here. Yeah, the only problem is water.
Water supply has always been a problem on Banaba. There are frequent droughts and no surface water. Before 1900, the only sources of water during a drought were the narrow holy caves which only the women were allowed to enter. The memory of those hard times is preserved in dance. When it does rain, the land quickly turns deceptively green. But much rainwater is wasted. There isn't enough money for repairs. The BPC shipped water here from Australia. Nowadays, the storage tanks they left are seldom more than half full, and the distribution of water depends on one old tanker.
All we need is water, stability of water. You can see what was done here in 80 years of colonial rule. The technology here was the finest technology in the world. So now let's bring that technology back and let's do something positive. Let's use this as a showplace for the rest of the world. Let's show the world what can be done to rehabilitate a place.
One partner in any rehabilitation would be the Republic of Kiribati, of which Banaba is a part. The Kiribati government maintains a presence on the island. It provides the school with equipment and staff. But children wanting secondary education have to leave Banaba. Once educated, though, there is precious little for them to do on the island. With all the difficulties of life here, what makes people want to return to Banaba?
Antiroro rikiraki ayo, kia mangong roi rongongon Banaba popun na paya, or Jepe ayata upairike kaupa yakonani kabuapa yarirampi, ayaturo ayo, irangikan na kumay wana pa noro roi jatayo, nataya popun na paya.
If it's possible to rehabilitate Banaba and make it be suitable for settlement again, definitely we'll come back. It's awkward to teach our Banaba custom on a different land as Fiji. But I think it's best that we come back and we teach our children on our own land, our custom, because this is where our ancestors were born.
But Banaba produces nothing for export nowadays and has no way of attracting foreign investment. So rehabilitation will depend crucially on aid from abroad.
Banabans have been pushed into the modern world. We cannot walk away and leave them. We must give them technical advice, assistance, and that's where the money would come through. The money, rehabilitation programs, projects, development projects, infrastructure, desalination plants.
But there are precious few signs of the large-scale aid needed if dreams of a mass return to the island are to become reality. The history of Banaba is in many ways typical of the Pacific Islands. It's a story of encounters between the old world and the new, between the traditional and the modern. Each successive historical wave of visitors to Banaba has brought new problems for some, new opportunities for others, and new interrelationships for all. And running alongside the story of injustice etched in the very landscape of Banaba is the romantic vision of the South Sea Island.
They can mine this place, they can do whatever they want to do to it, they can run a bulldozer through it all, it's still Banaba. Well, Bakonakai, yesterday, sitting on that rock above the place was just magic. And the breeze looking out over the sea, and the beach at Uma, that's magic. The whole place for me is magic.
Just another Pacific island, isn't it?
No, no, it's not. And you try and argue that with any of these people that are here today, you know, that have come here on this trip. You wait till you try and leave this place. That's when it hits you.
She wants to stay here. Given a choice like that, she prefers to stay here. Die and bury here. Because she was born on this island.